The Sportsline Podcast continues to roll on, and we always appreciate you checking us out on the CHCH and Parrot Media platform. I'm Bubba O'Neill. As I always say, this pod loves to promote the Golden Horseshoe's outstanding athletes, coaches, executives, and, of course, sporting events. Now, with that said, today, we're going to go national. We are talking about not just the Tiger Cats in this discussion, but we will expand to the latest happenings regarding the Canadian Football League. There are a number of people who are more than qualified to talk about the CFL in a balanced and legitimate fashion, but I think this fella tops the charts. Not only is this Carleton University grad a columnist for the Winnipeg Free Press, but he's also the president of the Football Reporters of Canada. Jeff Hamilton, thank you so much for joining us on the Sportsline Podcast.
Bubba, it's always a pleasure to chop up CFL football, and especially with you, my man. Really happy to be here. I would add one thing to my resume. Also a co-host of the weekly show, started last season of CFL 110. Me and my
Yes.
co-host Hustler, Andrew Hustler Patterson. We go every Tuesday at 3:15, including this afternoon. Assuming we're shooting it on Tuesday here. So check it out there, but really happy to be here, man. Really happy to chop up all things sports, especially CFL with you, my man.
Yeah, the Hustler, he's a beauty. What a piece of work. I'm glad you get to work with him. I'm looking forward to seeing that. So everyone, hey, check it out. Check out the show. Let's get right into it. There's so much going on and such little time to discuss. Hey, just hours ago, the Bills, and I'm talking about the Buffalo Bills, and Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment have announced a marketing relationship in Toronto, kind of marking the start of the NFL's most concerted effort to develop its Canadian fan base since its last regular season game in Toronto in 2013. I mean, they're going so far out to say that the Argonauts' October 4th game against the Hamilton Tiger Cats and the Bills, it will have a Bills theme with the Argos and the Tiger Cats. There's all kinds of cross-breeding going on. Jeff, would we be worried if we were a Toronto Argonauts or a CFL fan in the Golden Horseshoe?
I don't know if worried is the right word, right? Because I think there's been concern maybe as an Argonaut fan under the ownership of MLSE that I think, has always kind of left things a little bit unstable, but at the same time has brought in stability of having an owner with deep pockets. So, so it's kind of a weird relationship. If anything, Bubba, I think this is just the latest hit against the Argos fan base. You look at not too long ago, we were talking about the Toronto's decision to have home games on the road next season as they get ready to host the FIFA World Cup, right? That means home games in Hamilton, in Winnipeg, where I am, in Regina to play the Riders. That was a big knock against the fan base who felt alienated, who felt disrespected that, their team, the one that they passionately cheer for every year, is now going to have this competitive disadvantage by having 3 of their home games played on the road, and arguably 3 of the most craziest stadiums that you wouldn't want to play in. So this to me is just another knock against what I think is a very passionate fan base in Toronto. Now, do they need the attendance to go up? Do they have people showing up, games every week? No. But those that do show up are passionate, are loud, definitely bring, a genuine energy to the team. And to kind of see this play out, I mean, it's not surprising. We know MLSE in particular, when we were having the conversations about the CFL partnering with the XFL, all we heard coming out of that was how on board MLSE it was with that plan, and more importantly, their want to be an international brand, and that's what the Buffalo Bills bring to that partnership. I don't want to paint it out as a super negative thing per se. I mean, obviously, if you're talking with the context of the CFL and particularly the Toronto Argonauts, I don't know how you see much of a silver lining here, but I do see it as a group who wants to grow the game of football in that province. Unfortunately for Argos fans, they're doing it with the very, very, very popular NFL, and I would argue the very, very popular Josh Allen-led Buffalo Bills. So from a CFL standpoint, this feels like a major miss. However, from a sports company branding, MLSE trying to grow their portfolios, maybe even one day host, future Buffalo Bill games here, right? Attract some of the fan base from Buffalo into Toronto, get that kind of relationship. You see, I don't know how much of it is Minnesota to Winnipeg as much as it is from Winnipeg to Minnesota to watch Viking games, but having that relationship that's already kind of, it has existed obviously between the two cities, take that extra step. Unfortunately for Argos fans, it's just another one of those, oh, here we go again when it comes to, feeling respected within your own market.
Well, there's no doubt they must feel second best when an announcement like this comes. Just one more quick question on this topic. If the National Football League were to even play some regular season games in Toronto, whether it be BMO Field or a retrofitted BMO Field, is that it for the Argos?
I don't think you can say that's it for the Argos. Let's face it. You mentioned like second fiddle, to the NFL team in Buffalo, but they've really been third, fourth fiddle within their own portfolio, right? We talked about this quite often, that even when you go to different venues owned by MLSE, there's very little representation, if anything, of the Toronto Argonauts, say at the hockey arena or the Jays Stadium. Those don't have a real Argonauts feel, and not that they're supposed to, but they don't use that cross promotion. So you kind of already know how MLSE feels about the team. That being said, again, if you want to revisit history, it was MLSE that stepped in a big way to purchase the Argos, to make sure they had life. So I do think it does come across, or at least strengthens the argument that the Argos are a burden in the broader MLSE sports portfolio, but I think we've all kind of known that anyways. And I don't think this is a knock on the Argos from MLSE as much as it is a prop up of other properties in their portfolio. They obviously want to have an NFL presence. We know how popular the NFL is up here in Canada. We know how popular it is, particularly in Southern Ontario. So it doesn't surprise me at all. As much as it might leave a bitter taste in a lot of people's mouths, I don't think this spells the end for the Argos. Is it a good thing for the Argos? I think you'll have a really hard time making that argument, Bubba, but I don't necessarily think that this is the obituary of the Toronto Argonauts as they currently stand under ownership by MLSE in Toronto.
Let's go to the CFL standings as of going into week 15. And Jeff, it's been years since I've taken a look at the West and the East in terms of these standings. And it's like two top teams, the Tiger Cats, and then the rest. It begs the question, and I know I've gone there with several people across the country on this discussion. I'd love your opinion on the fact, does the East-West relationship and standings and playoff format, does that still work? Is it still legitimate, or does it need change?
It's a very interesting question. I think it's a valid question. It really depends what you care more about when it comes to CFL or what you prioritize more. I find myself as somebody who's not overly passionate about this topic. I do see the value in going to one division, getting the top two teams to have a bye in the first round and playing out the other, 6 remaining teams in the playoffs to play it out the way they would, whatever, right? The bye or whatnot. I do think that it's important to have divisions as well. If only for geography still matters in the CFL. Now it matters a lot less than it used to. It mattered because, back in the 60s and 70s and stuff, maybe you didn't watch, if you were in the East time zones, you didn't watch a lot of the West games and vice versa. Now, obviously with technology, people watch, all the different games, but I do think it matters to be regional. I do think it might not affect maybe early on. If you were to go to one division in the West, as we know, has been a lot more dominant division over the East in history here. When you look at the crossovers, and obviously them all coming from the West over to the East, there is those conversations that we talk about every year where the East division, the leader, you can see it right now, right? With the 7-5 Hamilton Tiger Cats lead in the East. A week ago, they would have been tied with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, right? Who are trying to get their way into, give some breathing room of third in the West. So I do understand the argument to go to one division because of that competitive imbalance, if you will, between the two divisions, or what we've seen. But I also think the short-term gain might lead to long-term pain. And what I mean by that is what I was alluding to earlier was that, yeah, if you start seeing, Calgary versus Saskatchewan in the first year of this realignment, people will probably still get behind it or whatever. But if you're consistently seeing the same two teams from the same division, I do think there's risk or fear for in this case, the East, the interest in the East to wane, right? And we know how important the Toronto market is, the Hamilton market is. We know how important the East markets are to the health and success of the league. Well, I do have a lot of time. As you can tell, I'm sitting on the fence because I really don't think there is a right decision here. Like, I do think that I do see the frustrations on both sides, and I see the benefits on both sides. But when you actually do look at both cases and try to really break down the advantages and disadvantages, I do think they become closer than you might think on the disadvantages side. Everyone's looking at the West versus the East, how dominant the West has been, and I think that they can look at that alignment and be like, yeah, that's something we should be doing. I don't necessarily agree with that. Now, there is one other thing I do think it would encourage. Now, I'm not saying the East teams are going in to every season thinking, oh, we got it easy, we don't need to win more games than we want. Of course, that's not the case, but I do think it would encourage some teams to know what kind of battle they're in. I do think, and it hasn't always been the case, even in recent years, but more often than not, it's certainly been more difficult to secure a playoff spot out of the West than it has out of the East.
It's just so strange to me because this argument comes up all the time. But then you look at the Argonauts, and they've won the Grey Cup 3 times in the last 5 years. It's bizarre to me. With many times facing teams in the West that actually have a better record. Let's stick with the Argonauts here. And there's a big question going on right now. From the time Chad Kelly went on social media and released the comeback video, now there's questions about who should be starting for the rest of the season. Should it be Chad Kelly, or some people are saying an MOP candidate in Nick Arbuckle? Your answer, Jeff.
I love the Nick Arbuckle story, and the answer I'm going to give you, Bubba, is not my personal opinion. I think you have a great situation in both quarterbacks, right? You look at Nick Arbuckle and what he's been able to do this season. He's leading the league in passing yards. He's one off Bo Levi Mitchell and Hamilton for the most passing touchdowns this year. He hasn't been the issue in an otherwise pretty disappointing season so far, obviously, at 4-8. That being said, this is Chad Kelly's team. And the reason why I'm saying you go with Chad Kelly is not because I don't think Nick Arbuckle has deserved another look or extended time here. I'm saying it's Chad Kelly because I think that's exactly what Ryan Dinwiddie is going to do. And so this is a matter of being right and wrong, not my opinion. And if you look at Ryan Dinwiddie's comments, whether it was last year's Grey Cup, I don't want to say he's nonchalant about Nick Arbuckle, but he's kind of like, oh yeah, that's like, I think he thinks he's making Nick Arbuckle into a star. I think Ryan Dinwiddie thinks and I don't think he's wrong, is the hardest worker in that entire organization, and has put Nick Arbuckle in a position to be successful. And I think he has no doubt in his mind that he could get even more out of Chad Kelly. And that's why I lean towards Chad Kelly, is that, yes, he hasn't played all season. He needs to play eventually here, right? And he needs, and when he's at his best, there are few quarterbacks that are better than him. And, he brings a certain swagger. I've been using that word far too often when describing this situation. I don't like that word, but I can't seem to find another one outside of that, and confidence that Chad Kelly brings to that offense, right? He brings a certain swagger that aligns with the attitude of that group. And I think if you can get him back under center in a situation where you're chasing your way better situation than you were a couple weeks ago as far as playoff picture, I think you're leading with your number one guy. So in that situation, I think it's going to be Chad Kelly the rest of the season. We may not see Nick Arbuckle again unless it's relief time or we see another injury with Chad Kelly, which is unfortunate. The good news for Nick Arbuckle, of course, is he's done enough to extend his career, right? Prior to his Grey Cup performance, I don't think a lot of people had him on a CFL roster. He obviously was able to do what he did against Winnipeg in the championship game, re-signed with Toronto, and now has proven to be a pretty decent number one option. Will he get that opportunity? That's still, that's still to be seen, but it's a much better situation, much better prospect for him, given his play this year than maybe arguably ever in his career since leaving Calgary.
The Rodney Dangerfield of the Canadian Football League is Nick Arbuckle, because I don't know what else the guy has got to do, honestly. And yeah, the record is the record is, but I think that's got a lot to do on a team effect there. And he's putting up these gaudy numbers. The team is hot right now, and I don't know. It just kind of reminds me of what was going down in BC last year, that all of a sudden, boom, in comes Nathan Rourke and VA. I know he was injured a little bit, though, but it was going to be Rourke to win or lose, and I think the team chemistry got all blown up. And that may not happen in this situation. Perhaps that wasn't handled properly last year compared to what Dinwiddie will do now. So let's see what happens. At least you got two good quarterbacks, that's for sure. Sticking with quarterbacks, Zach Collaros pulled from the Banjo Bowl. This was the third time this season that he had been, walked off the field and not to return due to, what type of injury we don't know that he suffered this time. The last two injuries were described as neck injuries. Jeff, there's all kinds of conversations going on about Zach Collaros right now, if he should even step on the football field again. What do you say?
I would start off by saying, Bubba, some of those comments, and I think you heard them in the immediate aftermath on the CFL and TSN panel, talking about whether, Zach Collaros should ever play football again. Should he consider his long-term health and playing with his grandkids when he's older? Like, I understand those conversations, and it is a byproduct of living in this instant analysis live sport machine, right? Everyone wants to break down, make assessments, but I think it was highly speculative to be talking about his future in that way, and for a couple different reasons. Yes, is it concerning the number of games that Zach's been pulled from games? Absolutely. But as you alluded to, as you mentioned, those two previous ones this season were owing to a neck injury. And I mean, you can sit there and roll your eyes and say, sure, it's a neck injury. By suggesting that, or I guess suggesting it would be a concussion or multiple head injuries, you're essentially saying that the team's medical staff is lying and putting a player out there with serious head issues. And anyone who knows anything about the equipment staffs in the Canadian Football League, particularly here in Winnipeg, knows that just isn't true. Like, Zach Collaros isn't going out there with a mushed melon, trying to get through his reads and plays or whatever, and is hurting, right? He obviously cares about his long-term future. He obviously cares about his family. It's obviously something he's had discussions with his wife, Nicole, in the past. And so kind of hearing some of this post-game analysis about those very things felt to me to not only be incredibly premature, they came across as disrespectful. And so, I don't think that they were disrespectful. Like I said, none of the comments come with malicious intent. In fact, I would argue that they come with pure care for Zach Collaros, right? And what he's done in this league and who he is as a person. Anyone who knows Zach Collaros knows how great of a guy he is, how great of a father and husband he is. And so, yeah, of course you're worried about his long-term future, but to essentially say he shouldn't be playing football again or to come across as a concerned parent or a medical doctor without any reports or any factual evidence of the injury just feels premature. Now, that being said, Bubba, I mean, this is obviously not a good situation for Winnipeg. After 5 straight trips to the Grey Cup, their season is in peril here at 6-6, and without their number one quarterback probably for at least a week here. I don't anticipate Zach practicing on Tuesday. Maybe he comes back in this week, and maybe there's potential for him to play Friday in Hamilton. But I do think that's probably not a reasonable goal at this point. But at the same time, I don't know if I have no doubt in my mind, I guess I should wrap it up by saying that number 8 will be back on the field this season. At least that seems to be the plan. We'll have to see how long it takes for him to get back.
Let's stick with Friday Night Football and the meeting between the Bombers and the Tiger Cats, in which is essential, and it's huge for both teams, quite honestly, in the standings. But let's hit it from a different angle. It's going to be called the Team Ted game, and it's someone that you and I both know personally very, very well, and Ted Govaya and the battle that he's having with a serious form of cancer. Your thoughts on, I mean, obviously he was there for a decade and many, many roles. This is a tough topic for so many reasons, but your thoughts about, what I think the Bombers and the Tiger Cats are doing, and the fact that this is going to be a special and maybe an emotional night.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there's a lot of people that love Ted Govaya and what, who are, obviously close to the Canadian Football League, much like, another man we lost not too long ago in Craig Smith lived in Regina, but, had his fingerprints all over the league. Ted has a great story with the CFL, right? He's a guy who, made his way up in, Canadian sport and whatnot, and scouting and whatever, and really worked his ass off in Winnipeg, right? To identify talent, to really have his fingerprints all over the Winnipeg Blue Bombers' recent run here, right? A lot of those names are attached to Ted's scouting and Ted's management style. So, it's obviously unfortunate as he gets a well-deserved opportunity here in Hamilton to then have to deal with health concerns, right? And as you mentioned, a pretty vicious battle with cancer here, right? So just life sucks in a lot of ways, and life's beautiful in a lot of ways. But, in this situation come Friday, I think we're going to be able to lean into a lot of the beauty of what life offers, and really honor a man who's put his time in the CFL, who's done incredible things, who continues to fight valiantly day in and day out. So any opportunity to support Ted, and obviously very fitting here with his former team up against his new team, and to see just the success he's having in Hamilton, to see the success the Tiger Cats are having with him as their general manager is a really special thing to see, and I'm sure it will be that specialness will be an extension of Friday, and the support that he's going to get from both sides. I've also loved the Team Ted T-shirts that have made their way to all organizations. I know. Bombers head coach Mike O'Shea has worn it. If he hasn't worn it every game, has definitely worn it several games. I know that because I can recall seeing that T-shirt on a number of occasions in his post-game press conferences. So, I personally, got a chance to know Ted obviously during his time here in Winnipeg, and I really appreciated all my conversations with him. He's a guy that can talk about more than just football, and has a zest for life that goes beyond the 3-down game. But to see his success this year, and to be able to support him and honor him on Friday, I think will be, as you mentioned, an emotional but much needed and special acknowledgement of a man who's done a lot for this league and the two teams that are going to be playing on Friday.
Thank you for that, Jeff. Those are great words, and obviously someone, as you said, that you got to know the man, and that there is a football brain there that is incredible, but real good dude too, real good dude. Let's end on this. Only about 5 minutes left, Jeff, but this has been one of the more, I've never seen conversation about the Canadian Football League stem from one person on social media like Luke Wilson has, TSN commentator for the NFL and the CFL. Most recently, he put out something that I will not be muzzled. He's said some sometimes controversial, sometimes some very true things about the Canadian Football League. Jeff, are his comments fair or foul?
I think they're fair. I mean, like his comments specifically on the game, on the whether it's play calling, whether it's the excitement level of a particular contest, whether it's about the board of governors, whether it's about his own company he works for. Like I think they're all fair. I mean. I don't know how I would even suggest foul, in the sense that I think anyone's opinion is welcome to their opinion, right? And when we're talking from a strictly football, 3-down CFL standpoint, whether it be the rules, whether it be its governance, whether it be whatever it is, I think Luke brings a breath of fresh air. I mean, there are some things that I think, when you look at over the years, media certainly, jumped on, but I do think that they require a new voice, right? Whether that be the attendance issues in Toronto, whether that be, whatever it might be, the sloppy play, some of the, maybe lack of creativity on offenses, over the years. And maybe that's similar to defenses, right? Like, so I think, Luke is a guy who obviously understands the game. He knows the game. He has a passion for the game. He wants to see it change. And I think that's ruffled a lot of feathers of people, which I think, is necessary in some cases, and certainly just to get the conversation going, right? There's a lot of people who have turned away from the CFL, right? A lot of younger generations. And I think a guy in his mid-30s who played in the NFL, who's won a Super Bowl, who brings a particular attitude to social media circles, I think is that kind of person who can ruffle feathers, is the kind of person who can bring interest to a league that needs it, right? That wants to have a younger generation. And if you find his ways to be unorthodox, that's fine. Again, everyone's entitled to their own opinions. You don't have to agree with what he's saying, but he is bringing attention to the game. He's bringing attention. The league is listening. That TSN is listening. So I think in that respect, I do think it's more than fair. I think it's necessary in some cases.
Well, but why, you said ruffle feathers, like, why are people so irritated? I'll just use right in your own backyard, Hall of Famer Bob Irving. He's just so annoyed with him. The back and forth that I've seen on social media. Why does he seem to get underneath the skin of so many people?
Because I think that it's the CFL and its fans is a very passionate fan base. Like, I mean, even if you want to bring it to Winnipeg, like, I would argue there's more fans of the Winnipeg Jets in Winnipeg than the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And just to be clear here, you don't need to be a fan of one or the other. But I would say, in my experience, Bomber fans are probably more passionate. And I think a lot of CFL fans are older. And CFL fans are traditionalists, right? They don't want to see the game change. They think the value of the game as it's currently constructed, rules and all, is fine. They look at other issues, right? They look at marketing. They look at certain things and growing the game. They see the lack of, Bob has not been shy about a lack of priority on TSN, right? Who owns the broadcast rights of the league, right? He's been very vocal about that, as obviously Luke mentioned in his video here, right? But I do think there's a lot of traditional views. I know I've dealt with some of that, particularly early on, like when I started covering the league on a daily basis in 2016, right? Any suggestion of rule changes or any suggestion that the board might not be doing the right things was always met with some pretty fierce, defenses from people. And so it doesn't surprise me that he's ruffling feathers. When I say it's necessary, I'm not saying that everybody who has a traditional view of the CFL needs to be woken up or torn down or whatever. But what I would say is that I do think that there is a certain sector of CFL traditionalists that are trying to counter what might be an open dialogue here, right? And again, I mean, I'm not getting into tactics and communication, whatever, but I do think that there is two sides, if you will, Bubba, that both want to see the same thing, and that's the CFL thrive and to grow and to continue to be, must-watch TV on a week-to-week basis. It's just they have very differing opinions on how to go about that. And when sometimes those opinions differ to the degree that they sometimes differ, particularly with this league, then becomes kind of the animated conversation that I think is a little less constructive. But, I think with Luke, I think he's taking on something that's a bit of a burden in his life. As he mentioned, he's given up his weekends. The guy who's banked millions of dollars in his mid-30s. He could be having one of the best summers of his life, but he's dedicating his Friday nights to the CFL, right? And so I think he does deserve credit for those things, absolutely. And again, also taking on that traditional fan base. I know like I said, in my past, it hasn't been the easiest thing. I've never backed down necessarily or whatever, but to see him kind of, kind of hold the establishment to account, if you will, in that respect. I do think it's important. I do think that conversation about the league is important, and he certainly brought that. In a lot of ways, Luke Wilson is the biggest story in the CFL this season, and he's done that through his willingness to engage with people in social media, his willingness to call out certain things that, maybe not everybody is comfortable calling out about the league. And he's really not afraid of going after anybody, including his own employer. So I see that as a breath of fresh air. And I think, with the way the league is trending and the way that these conversations have been created online, I only hope that we do see better days for the CFL. And so, I think that's a long-winded answer here, but I do think Luke Wilson brings something to the product. And I do think that, above all, civil discourse online, I think, should be the main takeaway here. And we should be able to talk about the league and not go after one another over our opinions about a game I think we all love and want to see grow.
Jeff, this has been outstanding conversations. Of course, the clock is our enemy, about 30 seconds. Really appreciate you joining us. Maybe I'll see you in the Peg for the Grey Cup. Maybe we can have some further conversations on that. But again, real quick, where can we find you?
You can find me in the pages of the Winnipeg Free Press or online at winnipegfreepress.com. As I mentioned at the top of the show, me and Andrew Patterson here in Winnipeg on Winnipeg Sports Talk, we have our CFL exclusive show, CFL 110, where we break down the games that happened and we preview the games coming up and go over all the top stories in the Three Down Loop. So that's every Tuesday at 3:15. 4:15 actually Eastern where you are, so 3:15 Winnipeg time. We love doing it. We love chopping it up. We love talking three down football. And any excuse, Bob, if it means getting Hamilton in that Grey Cup to you and me to chop it up in person, I'll take that. So all the best of luck there in Hamilton for sure.
Appreciate your time, my partner. All right, folks, that's your Sportsline Podcast for the day. That was invigorating conversation. As you've just seen and heard, we love talking sports. If you do know of an athlete, team, or event to promote the Sportsline Podcast, do want to hear from you, please hit that thumbs up, like, and subscribe button. If you have something to say, we always appreciate your comments. And we had some hot, doozy conversations there. Some good topics. For the wonderful people that make the Sportsline Podcast possible, thank you so very much. And we'll see you real soon.